Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar on trauma-informed collaboration. This is part 3 in a 6-part series. My name is Elizabeth Meeker, and I am pleased to welcome you to today's presentation, and I'm here with my colleagues Cheryl Martin and Gwen Olton. So we want to start with what makes collaboration important to us. So we ask you to take a moment to write in the chat what makes collaboration important to you. And while people are taking a moment to reflect and write in, I just thought I'd share a few of my thoughts. To me, collaboration is one of the essential components of a trauma-responsive practice, and I think it's something we often talk about being collaborative, but it's a really specific skill set that I think takes a lot of time and attention. It really requires being able to be fully present with someone and be able to hear someone else's perspective and then be able to move together towards an objective or an outcome. So I think it's something that we need to pay attention to because it's really often talked about. So let's see what other people have to say about why it is important to them. Let's see. Someone wrote about mutual safety, perspective, and support. Collaboration is a more respectful way of approaching our work, and it creates a deeper client engagement. It ensures families are included in the planning and that all parties are working together. Collaboration is open and transparent communication. It's helpful to, it's important to have everyone on the same page, especially cross-systems involvement. It's essential to making our work both effective and enjoyable. So clearly this is something that many people, it resonates with us and we kind of see the importance of it. So I'm going to turn it over to Gwen and Cheryl to kind of take us further with this topic.
Yeah, hello. Hi, Gwen. Hi, welcome, everyone. We're happy that you're here with us again if you've been here with us already, and if not, we're happy that you're here for the first time. I think I would love to hear what makes collaboration important to you.
Okay, well, thank you for asking me. I think the years have gone on, and I really started to understand the importance of engagement with people, that relational piece, and started to look at various ways that people have been trying to make this better in the work they do, things like person-centered planning, motivational interviewing, and now trauma-informed responsiveness, that this word kept coming up over and over again for all of these things. Collaboration seemed to be at the bottom of this. How do we behave in a way that helps to engage people into our programs? So I think that's really where this has been important to me.
Right. Thank you. So as per usual, we have some objectives for our session today. I'm just going to go through these. So the first is that we're hoping by the end that we can define collaboration. You know, we'll kind of do that in the beginning. And we have one definition that we offer here, but there's, just like all of the principles of trauma-informed care, there's many definitions. So we'll go over a definition and our interpretation of the definition a bit. We'd like to be able to distinguish between collaboration and other kinds of problem solving. So one way that we might look at collaboration as a way of approaching a problem. It could be a problem of building furniture, right? Like that's one problem that we could approach collaboratively, and for our purposes, we probably have a different set of problems in front of us that might be a problem of engagement with services. It could be, you know, if you're someone who's looking at quitting smoking, the problem might be, how do I quit smoking? It might be, how do I talk about smoking? It could be all sorts of things, right?
Just be relational with your friends and your family, figuring out how can I make a stronger relationship, and there's collaboration in front of you again.
Right, so we'd like to be able to distinguish between collaboration and other kinds of problem solving, and we'll go over what we mean by that a little bit more. We'd like to be able to describe the relationship of collaboration to trauma-informed care or trauma-responsive care and other best practices. So how does this relate to what we've been talking about in this series? What does collaboration really have to do with trauma-responsive care? And then we'd like to recognize practices that we think might increase opportunities for collaboration. And before I go, look, you did remember.
I did remember.
We wanted to remember to put up this polling question. So we'd like to know if you feel confident that you understand what collaboration is. So just, yes, I'm confident, no, I'm not confident. So we haven't given you any definitions here. This is just, you know, before our session starts, do you already feel confident that you understand collaboration? So if you could answer that polling question, it'll help us out. So just going to give folks a minute to answer before we go forward. Okay. So while folks are chiming in, do we have some people answering?
I am not able.
Okay.
We're scrolling at the bottom there. Can we see anything there?
So we'll move forward. We do have some. Great.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's some split, right? So it looks like right now we've got about 120 people saying that they're confident that they understand collaboration, and about 40 or so saying they're not confident. So a mix, right? We may feel confident we understand what it is, but not always confident we can apply it, or confident that we apply it, but not confident that we could define it, maybe.
Or how it might look under different circumstances.
Yeah, right.
Every relationship has some nuances.
Right. So part of the reason we asked that question is that we feel that collaboration is frequently talked about and not explained. So people will just throw the term around, you know, as though we should just all collaborate, and there's not a lot of unpacking of what it means to collaborate. And so we wanted to, in this series and in this webinar in particular, kind of break that down a little bit and look at what does it actually take to collaborate with somebody.
I think it's important, too, to mention just how important collaboration is to some of the other principles of trauma-informed, too, because without it, it's going to be hard to restore power. It's going to be hard to have a sense of safety, because it really is that thing that gives equal power to the person in front of you.
Yeah. So just a quick review of the other principles that we've talked about, maybe in session 1 of trauma-informed care. Collaboration is one of them, and then the other 4 are trust, choice, restoring power or empowerment, and safety. So just, yeah, thinking about how does collaboration fit into those others. And when people were chiming in about what makes collaboration important to them, they even already talked about some of the ways that it's important. So it builds this sense of mutual safety. People have voice. They feel included, feel respectful when they're being collaborated with, and not someone just trying to solve a problem for them necessarily. So one definition of collaboration that we've thrown up here that we'll be adding to is that at sort of its simplest form, to collaborate is to work with at least one other person towards a common goal or a shared purpose. So that means you really don't collaborate by yourself, although maybe you collaborate with 2 competing sides of yourself. But in general, we think about it as collaborating with another person, at least one other person, and towards a shared purpose or a common goal. And we've also thought that we might take a minute to talk a little bit about our backgrounds and how that relates to how we think about collaboration, because Cheryl and I obviously are different people and have a different history, and so we've sort of come at notions of collaboration from different angles. So I'd love to hear from you first, if you don't mind.
Okay, so I'm a nurse, been around quite a long time in this field. A field that didn't necessarily really focus on collaboration. It focused on teaching and telling and fixing and helping. And so, you know, it really was a different journey to start to understand this other way of being with people. So, I think that's it for me.
Oh,
Now, I have more to say, but how about you?
You want to wait? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll also have a spoiler for Cheryl that she also comes to Collaboration with a strong and long history in motivational interviewing, and that MI has a very solid grounding and firm understanding of what it is to collaborate. And so I'm also a nurse, but came to nursing as a sort of second career, and also originally started off in the field of conflict transformation or conflict resolution. And so we also have a strong grounding and definition and discussion around collaboration. But what Cheryl and I have found is, as I've gotten trained in motivational interviewing as well, is that at bottom we're all sort of saying the same things, right? That how we look at the people in front of us, how we view the problem in front of us, really greatly informs how we approach a problem. Right. So if we think about a person as a problem versus a problem as a problem, and how we're going to work on a problem together, it really changes what, if anything, gets done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, and the other thing I'm thinking about as I go back into this with the motivational interviewing, and person-centered planning was another area I did a lot of work in this. People could hear the word, but they didn't know what that looked like very well. So it was turning that kind of theory or thought or word into something that was real in their everyday. So it does involve all those things you said. It is much bigger than just, I'm going to collaborate with you. Mm-hmm. I have to decide who you are, and what does that mean? And if I do not feel like you have something of value to share with me, why would I collaborate with you?
Right.
If I do not feel that you have the answers within you, why would I bother to collaborate?
Right.
So it's starting to understand that view of the person in front of you, like you mentioned, in a really deep way, because it will come out when you start to talk to people that I want you to do it my way, but I'm just trying to sneak in here and get you to do it my way.
Yeah, so what we really don't want is just lip service given to these principles of trauma-responsive care, right? So real collaboration entails this understanding of the person in front of you is having autonomy and really knowing what's best for themselves, and that, you know, we're there to help foster a change if that's what the person wants, but that it's really their life, if we're talking about collaboration in a service role. So let's talk a little bit more about what we think collaboration isn't, just because I think it helps clarify and flesh out this definition that we offered on the other slide a little bit more. So collaboration isn't compromise. So if we're going to look in a few slides ahead at conflict or problem-solving models and how collaboration fits into those, and one of these ways is compromise. And I wanted to disambiguate this portion a little bit more because I think it's an important point. So with compromise, you might, if we have a problem in front of if Cheryl and I have a problem and we're going to solve it, we may come to the same solution with compromise that we would with collaboration, but our internal states to get there are very different. So with compromise, you're sort of holding on to what you want and what you value and what's most important to you, and maybe your strategies about how to get there, and you're kind of only considering, for the most part, you're considering you in this solution. And Cheryl would sort of be doing the same thing. So she's holding what's important to her, and then we're coming together and seeing if we can give enough that we can kind of make something work. With collaboration, I'm holding Cheryl's values and ideals and not necessarily her strategies, but her needs and her values as just as important as mine. And so then I can hold both of these together and say, okay, is there something that will really work for both of us?
And what do you have to do to be able to hold my values? What do you have to do first?
I have to see your values as important and know what they are.
And figure them out.
Right. So we have to have a conversation about what it is that's important to us, and they have to get beyond just the level of, trying to get my hand into the camera. It has to get beyond a little bit deeper than just the level of what our strategies are to get there.
Right, because without asking, the only values we can bring into a conversation are our own. Right. Our own perspective, our own values.
Right.
That's hugely important to listening.
So hopefully that's at least a little clear. So collaboration isn't compromise. So if you ask two people how they feel about a solution at the end of compromise versus at the end of collaboration, even if the solution looks the same, chances are, if it's been true collaboration, people have 100% buy-in at the end of collaboration. They probably have 50% or some smaller or sometimes some greater buy-in if it's compromised. It depends on how much they felt they needed to give up to get to the solution. So in collaboration, we're not asking people to give up anything that they're not truly willing to give up.
There is no loss.
Right.
Only a gain.
Right. So again, that would mean that collaboration isn't passive assent. So it's not just me saying, you know what, you just do what you'd like. That'll work for me. That'll be fine. Right? And we actually see this a lot in healthcare and in behavioral health services as well. If you've taken other trainings with myself or Cheryl, you've likely heard, I know at least I say this a lot, that if someone doesn't have the power to say no to you, you really can't trust their yes. You just don't know what their yes means if they can't say no to you in a certain situation. And so we frequently find that service recipients are in this power dynamic where they don't feel they have the power to say no to whatever you're offering, and they may have they may have other stipulations on saying no. So if they say no, are their services going to be cut? Are they going to have poor attitudes from the people around them? Well, so will they lose social capital from you if they say no? So all of these things make saying no really high stakes for some people. And so they might just have passive assent. And so it's important to know that that is not collaboration.
Yeah, and it often plays out in comments from professionals like, well, they said they were going to do it and they didn't do it because the collaboration wasn't there. So there wasn't an honesty and a reality in the conversation. It was just really trying to get somebody to do the thing that they wanted them to do.
Right.
Yeah.
So we sort of semi-jokingly put up that collaboration also isn't easy. And it's not easy because probably the way most of us think about ease is things just going the way that we want. So if I just got up in the morning and like everything just went exactly as planned for me, and I didn't have to answer my emails because it wasn't easy, or whatever it is that bothers me throughout the day, it just happens, and I don't have to collaborate with other people, and I just get my preferences. That's one sense of the word ease, right? And so in this method of problem solving, it isn't easy, right? We have to figure out what other people's preferences are, and we have to figure out what's really important to us, which sometimes takes some internal work that we don't always feel like doing, and we have to ask the other person what's important to them, which also takes this step that people aren't used to. So not only is it that you might not get your preferences or your strategies, but you also have to have a sense of curiosity and really value the person in front of you. So there's this habitual thing that you might need to break.
And as I mentioned before, those years of nursing in an old structure, you may have habits or ways of being that are pretty significant to change. So absolutely there's going to be effort that's going to be needed every time you have a conversation.
Right. So it takes some trust. Do you want to say more about that?
Only that piece that, as I mentioned before, unless people feel they're in a safe and trusting relationship, what you're hearing is likely not to be what's really going on.
Right.
And so in giving that space for this trust and building that relationship, you're going to start to be able to really collaborate with somebody. Because you're going to have real information to work with.
Right. And it's not judgmental, right? So it'll be very difficult for someone to feel open to collaborating with me, and for me to really figure out what's going on with someone if I'm judging them. And that's something that is just an ongoing process that we check, right? So our brains may naturally judge all sorts of people or situations in all kinds of different ways. So it's a constant sort of check-in. And I think in general, if we are following this approach that Cheryl put at the bottom, so how we're viewing the person in front of us, if we in general hold this view that the people in front of us are intrinsically valuable, right, and that they are worthwhile, and that they have a lot to say and have 100% autonomy, then it will automatically lower that judgment a little bit, at least a little bit. And then you just have to work on the habit of the judgment, not so much the internal shift that it takes to stop judging.
And it's important to remember too that listening and inviting them to talk, and maybe there's a behavior that you wouldn't agree with because of its danger or something like that. When we are with the person, it is not, because we accept them as a human being does not mean that we're encouraging the behavior. And that's something to learn, because even if you are judgmental or you have something to say about that behavior, just telling them isn't going to make a difference. So this is about building a relationship and understanding that people's behaviors may not be things that you would support.
Right.
Risk or danger or something like that.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so I think we've touched on this a bit, but just to sort of say it more explicitly, we wanted to think about, what are your beliefs about, and what are our beliefs about the people that we're working with? And it can be the people that we're serving, and it can also be, our coworkers and each other.
Yeah. Are people worthwhile just because they are? And do you really hold that? Or do you have some sort of value system that puts some people at a higher space than another?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, these questions sound, and are sort of leading, right? So you may automatically know which answer we're looking for when you're looking at this question, but they're also an opportunity to really reflect for ourselves, right? Like, am I really holding the absolute worth of every individual that I meet, or do I sort of separate people based on their education level, or based on what they look like or how they're dressing, right? So we have all these designations, and unless we shine a light on them and really take a peek, we can't do much to unpack them or change them.
Right. And can you accept each person's right to autonomy and self-determination? So we can say this, but are we comfortable with that? If we found a way to accept that we can't make people do anything, it's a collaboration, a journey, a relationship in which when they do feel safe and when they do have a sense of power, they're able to do something for themselves. So I think that's another important thing just to think about. And do you focus on strengths versus the problem? And a lot of our systems set it up so the problem gets a lot of focus, and the strengths don't really. They sometimes get 2 lines in the end of a assessment or something. So what will help people change? And this is the bottom line. I will not make a change in my life based on my weaknesses. What am I going to do with those? I need to know what the strengths are. Those are the things that I can use to help me move to a different place. So I think that's very important to think about too.
Yeah, we have to be able for ourselves, be able to leverage our strengths to solve our problems, and it would be really great and valuable if we could help others leverage their strengths to work on what they would like to change. Yeah.
I have yet to be disappointed when I ask that question of people. No matter who they are, not even with the level of cognitive ability or where they are in a recovery from substance use, doesn't matter. Everyone, when I ask them about what they know about what's going on, how they want to work with that, they know. They know. They will surprise you to listen to what they think about their diabetes, what they think about their schizophrenia, what they think about whatever it is that they have.
Right. So
I think this is really important.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about collaboration, I've already, and so have you, really pulled this into a much bigger view of our world, like with our friends, our family, with each other in a group, with our leadership. So each one of these kind of situations carries kind of a different approach to this, right? So what I might do, and I'm working one-on-one with somebody I'm serving in the community, that collaboration is somewhat different than the collaboration if I'm an equal member of a group where we all are working towards some kind of decision. Then everybody's needs matter in that group around what they would like to see happen, versus when I'm with the client, hopefully, I am looking at their needs as the primary thing and not trying to fill my need to be needed or my need to fix or my need to do something that really isn't important to that relationship and that helping that person. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
We decide, what does it mean? Where does this goal come from? It's going to matter what the relationship is.
Yeah, it matters a lot, right? So it can sound pretty easy and pat to just say collaboration is to work towards a shared purpose. So you might very easily come up with a shared purpose with someone else. So why is collaboration so hard then, right? And it becomes so hard because there are a lot of little steps and 9 million different ways to reach a shared purpose. And we have a lot of opinions about which path is the right one, right? I mean, unfortunately, we just come with some sense of like, okay, there's our shared goal. Like, obviously, everyone would know, take path A, right? But it's not so obvious, and it's not people's preference frequently. So how we decide how to reach it and who gets to decide how they reach it, it becomes really important and becomes most of the work of collaboration.
Even the goal itself. If a team says, geez, we need to be more welcoming at our agency, and everybody's saying on board, yeah, we need to be more welcoming. But then what does that mean? Right. And what's the definition of that even for each team member? What do they mean by that? Maybe two very different things.
Yes, absolutely. So this last question, doesn't matter what your role is, really comes out here, and Cheryl already alluded to this, right? So and I did too when we talk about the power difference that can come into play, even if you don't feel like you have much power in a relationship, it's important to think about how you're viewing your power and how someone else is viewing your power. You don't necessarily know fully what they're thinking about it, but you can ask, so you can find out more that way. And there's also sometimes we can make some assumptions about what some of those power differences are, especially if we're in a clinical setting, right?
So we have to be, that internal thing is really important again. So we really have to understand our own values and our own agendas that we have when we're working with people, what's going on there. And I think that you mentioned the piece about competitiveness, so what it is. So why don't you just talk a little bit about that? It's not a competition amongst people, right?
Oh, collaboration isn't a competition? Yeah, no, that's true. So, spoiler alert for other slides, but
well, actually, it's on here too, so, but I agree. We'll collaborate together and get this right. I think it's really important that we see the person and they feel that they are the expert about themselves too. So there's that power thing.
Oh, you mean the competition between yourself and the person you're serving? I catch your drift.
Okay, different competition. Difficult sometimes to understand the meaning of other people.
It is. You really have to ask and get clarification.
And listen and hear about what they're thinking.
Indeed. Yeah. So it really isn't a competition between what you want and what the person wants, especially when you're working in this clinical role, right? So someone is, when they're seeking services, whether it's hopefully by choice, but really you're there to support them in what they need. That's how we envision the role of most clinical services and most clinical providers. And people can go much farther for themselves when you're in that supportive role. So we would like for it not to become a competition between like what you really want to happen for the person and what person wants to have happen, right? So if I'm thinking about some of the people that I've worked with in the past who were trying to change health habits for themselves. So some people were really, really sick from some of the choices that they had around how they were caring for their health. So smoking, for instance, in someone who was fairly sick and older and had lung cancer, right? So their notion of how to fix it was different than all of the people that they had talked to. And if I became in competition with them about what strategy would work best to reach the end goal, maybe we had a shared purpose, maybe we had some agreement around someone wanting to stop smoking. So if that's our shared purpose, I don't want to be in competition around the strategies to get there, right? It's really not about me and my strategies. It's about what's going to work best for them and how can I support you in that.
Yeah, it ultimately goes back to the autonomy piece of it again.
Yeah.
Who's going to have to carry this out? Who's going to have to live with this? And it's the person that we're serving, so it should be there.
Yeah. So I want to point out this last bullet, because it's not just your peers, but maybe your peer relationships at work too. So it's pretty important to shift to whatever the person that you're serving is most needing and what's most valuable for them to be working on. And when you're in an even sort of power relationship and you're working with a colleague, then it becomes pretty important for you to be able to introspect and see what's most important for you, what you're most needing, and also find out from the other person. Because we also see this go the other way, right, that it turns into this passive ascent where people don't feel confident that they can get their voice heard, aren't really sure how to communicate some of this, and then we end up, with a lot of lack of buy-in or a lot of dissent. And people say, I don't know what happened. We had like 3 meetings about it and nobody said anything. Well, what happened is people didn't feel comfortable or safe to speak up. You weren't asking the right questions that encouraged dissent, because you really won't find out what the issues are if you don't encourage dissent. And then it just doesn't get explored, and so it gets dropped until it's a problem.
Right.
And so this is why, even though people will think about collaboration as being like a slow process, like it'd be so much faster if I just told everyone what I want and just told everyone what to do. You can see if you have 3 meetings about something and nobody collaborates, and you get to the 4th meeting and now you have people unintentionally sabotaging a process because they don't like what you came up with, it actually is much less efficient than collaborating at the outset, right?
Absolutely. You can see this when people are trying to implement new things like maybe motivational interviewing or trauma-informed. When people do not have the common goal and truly have found that to be important to them and they've accepted it, you will have great difficulty trying to get any kind of best practice into it. And just people's hearts are not in it, they haven't accepted it, they haven't bought into it, they don't even maybe understand the true reasons, but they've just said yes because they didn't feel they had a voice to that.
Right.
And then you're going to spend months, years maybe, rather than the time that it might have taken if you had that collaboration up front.
Right.
Yeah, collaboration has to happen at every level.
Yeah.
So when I want the staff that I work with to be able to collaborate well with the people they serve, they have to feel like they're getting that same level of collaboration from their supervisors with them, from their peers with them, that's really the culture in which we all work in this collaborative, that everybody has a voice, everybody has a right to say something, in fact, not just a right, encouraged to do it, and then we work together as a team to find the answers. Yeah, right, very important.
So how does all this talk of collaboration relate to trauma-informed care, right? So we sort of mentioned it in the beginning, collaboration is one of the key principles, and Dr. Meeker talked about in the beginning why it's important, and also how it relates to trust and really to much change at all. So we wanted to spell it out a little bit more. So if we're thinking about people who have experienced a lot of trauma, it's likely that they have low trust that their needs matter to other people. If you've had the experience of your needs not being taken into consideration and being harmed over and over again, so your need for safety just continually not being met, you just might not trust that the world and people in general care very much about what's important to you and that your needs matter. So this is a way to explicitly show that you matter and that someone else matters.
Very important.
Yeah. People with trauma may have few experiences of being considered in decision-making, so decisions just being made for them over and over and over again, feeling like they have really low power to change outcomes or change the course of their lives.
While you're going through these, Glenn, if people would just think about, you hear a lot lately about patient activation, that's a measure that people do. When you think about that, how do you activate people? It really is very similar to what we're talking about here. So if I don't trust, if I don't feel like I'm involved, if I feel, and we're going to go on to the next one, powerless or hopeless, I'm not going to be activated.
Right.
Nothing's going to change. I don't feel like I have any power. I don't feel like I have any hope. Why bother? And so, this is really about how do we help folks that have had this level of trauma in their lives start to feel like, hey, I'm important to this. I can do this. I'm part of this.
Right, right. Yeah, and so that next bullet after feeling invisible, powerless, and hopeless, that programs, plans, whatever, it's not going to work if you don't have buy-in, and you really don't get much buy-in without collaboration. If people just already agree with your strategies, then great, you really don't need to collaborate. The work of it is already done. But if you're not in agreement around processes, around what the goal is, all of these steps we've been talking about, you don't have that buy-in, then you really won't get anywhere. So Cheryl had mentioned an example in the beginning of you know, doctors or other providers saying, well, I don't understand, they said they would do the thing, they didn't do the thing,
yeah.
right? So when people aren't doing the thing that you set out to do, you probably haven't collaborated on it, especially if it's a repeating pattern. Once in a while, you know, maybe something has happened and that's why they didn't do the thing. So a car broke down or, you know, whatever, someone was sick. But if you have this sort of pattern, if you're working with people and all of them are never doing the thing that you've agreed on, probably you don't have true agreement around this, and it's an opportunity to examine where is their dissent, what is the dissent about, and can you collaborate on a solution together that works for the people that you're serving, not just for you.
Right.
Yeah.
They have to find the importance in this for themselves.
Absolutely.
They won't absorb our importance. It has to be their importance.
Right. And so this last bullet here, that to collaborate, we have to really be curious. We have to really have empathy and understanding of the person in front of us. And we know that when we, because there's all these nonverbal cues that we express these things, right? So all of these signs that I can show to Cheryl when I'm talking with her, that I'm really listening, I'm engaged in what's happening, I'm asking questions, I'm curious. She can see from my face and from my body language, which you have limited control over, right? She can see that I'm in a space of trying to understand her. And that automatically helps our mirror neurons and our brain unhook from this fight, flight, freeze. And that's a big part of some of the poor outcomes that we experience with repeated trauma, right, is that we get stuck in this physiologic feedback loop telling our brains that we're in danger. And so if we can help with the connection and the relationship that we build to unhook a little bit from that system, we can have much more success and we can help the person feel safe. And we want them to not only feel safe, but actually be safe with us.
Yeah. Over time, it changes the belief system.
Right.
There are safe people out there in the world.
Yeah. So what are some pro-collaborative attitudes? I think we've talked about some of this, but I've been talking a bit. You want to say?
Yeah, well, non-competition, and that was a piece I was going to leave with you.
Oh, whoops.
Go ahead, if you want to say something about that.
I think we've covered it, yeah.
Okay, you're comfortable with that.
Yep.
This idea of everybody having expertise, I love this expression, pooling everyone's expertise. So this is really the understanding that everybody has something to bring to this from their own lives. So I think that's a very important piece of it, and the power with and not power over. So we enhance the power of our whole group by understanding this piece about expertise, to understand that we're together, and in that we become stronger.
Right.
And I think that's very important too.
Yeah, I think I do want to add one thing about the non-competition here, because I think it relates to that, the power with and power over, right? So if we're operating with this really competitive mindset that it's sort of, I really want to push my agenda because that means I win and I'm kind of at the top of the pile here, it leads us into this power over and not power with. And it comes from this mind frame, right, of there just not being enough, so I want to make sure I have the power because there's not enough for everybody, so I want to make sure I get my share. But in collaboration, there's really a different orientation that when we care for the needs of everybody, it expands our resources. It expands what we're willing to do. I'm much more willing, and Cheryl will be much more willing to give up all kinds of things if I really am truly holding her needs and really and truly understanding. So rather than contracting and making it so we have very few resources, very little willingness to help each other, collaboration expands and makes it so that everyone's needs can get met and everybody can feel attended to and that they matter.
There's something in MI about you don't have to give the solution because probably you don't know the solutions for everything. So it's just that whole idea that you can't possibly know the answer for everything as an individual.
Right.
When you have that whole group, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a gold mine.
Right.
That's a gold mine.
Yeah, absolutely. oh man, I almost made a really bad, well, now I am making a bad pun about a goal mine. Get it? Shared goal? Sorry, everyone. Okay. So again, we want to think about problems as projects.
I do enjoy working with you, Gwen.
I love working with you too. So it's because of my puns. So we want to think about problems as projects and not the people as the problems, right?
Right.
Right. Or not people as projects either.
Right. We're all just working at the best that we can with what we've had.
Right. Okay, so I want to spend just a minute or two on conflict styles, or you could think about it as problem-solving styles. So this comes from an old kind of evaluation of your style of conflict from Thomas Kilmann. And there's, you know, a whole series of sort of tests you could take to kind of look at what kind of problem solver you are or how you are in conflict. But I really just wanted to go over these to think about and disambiguate collaboration from some of them again. So competing, I've sort of gone over. So you can see on the scale, hopefully you can see, it sort of goes from unassertive to assertive on the y-axis, and then on the x-axis it's uncooperative to cooperative. So, you know, collaboration being high on cooperation, high on assertiveness. And so the sort of opposite here would be avoiding, right? And that would be some of, that would be just kind of avoiding the problem altogether, shying away from it, not really wanting to engage with it. It's just easier to just kind of not have the conversations, just put your head down, do your job, ignore the stuff, ignore the dissent. And accommodating, sort of similarly, right? You're not actively avoiding it, but you're just sort of taking on the solution of other people so that you can just get on with things. Competing, it's like your way or the highway, like you're going to get your strategy and that's it. And compromising, we've sort of already talked about. So there's some cooperativeness, some assertiveness, but you're still, you know, feeling like you're having to give a lot up to get to a solution. And so there are times where these types of problem solving make the most sense, right? So if we think about, if I'm in an emergency situation and someone is really sick and I'm the only nurse in the room, it makes a lot of sense for me to go with a competitive strategy, right? So for me to just tell people what to do, it's not a great time for collaboration. I'm not particularly interested in, you know, Dr. Meeker's, for instance, opinion on blood sugar in that moment, right? Like if I'm in an emergency, at that time, it makes the most sense for someone to take charge and tell people what to do and get through the emergency. And we can think about all kinds of situations, right? If you're someone who's experiencing trauma where avoidance or accommodation make the most sense to keep you safe. So what we want to do is find ways to encourage another way besides, you know, these processes. So to say, hey, we're actually safe here, and we have the time, so it's okay. It's not an emergency. We actually could collaborate.
Absolutely.
And another sort of diagram or model coming out of conflict transformation and conflict resolution theories, and it comes from other places too, right, is this notion that the positions or the strategies that people use to get a need met are just sort of the tip of the iceberg. So it's a triangle in this picture. In some places you can find it being, you know, a picture of an iceberg where you see what people are arguing about or, you know, their positions on something as being just the tip of the iceberg, and underneath are all these other things that are really important. So if you think about, you know, a mom and her son fighting over cleaning a room, and I'm the mom and I'm fighting with my son, right? I might have one firm strategy that I am after. So I take a really firm position with my son about cleaning his room. You know, you have to get it done by 3 p.m. and you got to pick up all these toys and they have to go in this bin. Like, I may have some very specific strategies, but what's the need underneath that? You might have a need for order or peace, some ease. It could be a lot of things, but that's sort of maybe the underlying thing. That's the underlying needs that are going on for me. And likely, there's probably other ways that I can meet those needs behind the specific strategy of the room being cleaned at a specific time in a specific way. So that's just sort of like a, you know, an at-home example, but there are lots of examples where this can play out at work, too. So really we want to just sort of get at this notion that if you look at the top two triangles, they're sort of fighting, so their strategies are not in alignment and they disagree. So strategies are very narrow and they narrow our view of what's possible. But when we get down to the underlying needs, you can see the arrows are going out to say that the needs that we have are not actually in competition. So it's very unlikely in my example, right, that my son does not also have a need for peace. It might not be as strong as my needs, so he might rate it, you know, 6 out of 10 on importance, and I might rate it 9 out of 10, but they're not actually in competition. And if we look at our needs as being the things that we want to collaborate on, it really, rather than having a narrow view, it really expands our view of what's possible. So there are many different solutions that might meet a need for ease and peace. There are only a few things that will make me happy if I only have a strategy. I have one strategy for that, and that's it. It'll be really tough for me to walk through life and feel like my needs are getting met. Okay, so for interpersonal collaboration, what do we need to do?
Practice. Practice.
Yeah, we do. Yeah. So we need to know sort of what's most important. We've talked about this a bit.
What's most important to each person, how it fits into whatever it is that we're looking at doing. And when we're talking about the people we serve, again, we go back to the same thing that we've already talked about, that their needs are going to be the primary needs that we have. We have some professional needs around safety and that kind of thing, but when we're looking at the long-term goals, they belong to the person in front of us. Again, you've brought up the piece about disambiguating problem from people, that the problem sits by itself. The people we have the relationship with and we're working with. Positive action language, absolutely important. Yeah, so this is part of MI, of course, is learning to listen for people's language that is about making a change and helping things being better, and taking that language and reflecting it back to them and really making it something rather than staying in the sustain and stay the same and never make a difference happen. So positive action language helps in so many ways to reinforce the person in front that, hey, they got a good idea going on here, something that works, but also that there's hope and possibility that I can do something to get this need met. I think that's really important, and focusing on strengths, too.
Yeah, one of the things that I love about this bullet on positive action language is it's one of these examples of where MI or, you know, Cheryl's practices cross over with some of the conflict resolution practices that I have as well. And so positive action language can also be, part of it is this looking for and using, explicitly naming what it is that we do want and not what we don't want, right? So we would move away from telling people, I don't want you to smoke, right? When there's this little poem that someone wrote, and it says something like, when you tell me a don't, all I hear is I won't. So if you tell people what you don't want, they immediately are going to think, I won't do what you...
Which, by the way, has been supported and verified by all of the research that we've done with motivation.
Right. So when we tell people what we do want instead, that's an actionable item. So if I, throughout this webinar, was tapping my pen on the table and Cheryl told me don't do that, what might I do instead? I might tap it on the laptop. I might tap it on her, you know. But if she tells me what she does want instead, I'm really looking to have quiet through this webinar, and I'm finding the pen distracting. Would you be willing to wait to tap it until after the webinar is over? So she's saying exactly what she does want, not what she doesn't want, and that makes it much easier for her to get her needs met.
Really good skills to have when working with children and students, yes?
Definitely. Okay. So we're going to run through a quick example so we don't run out of time and have a little space for questions. So we thought we just might go over a sort of funny example of how collaboration might work in the workplace. So suppose we have these two characters, and in our example, it'll be Cheryl and I. So I'm gonna be Sam, and you're gonna be Alex.
I'm definitely Alex.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so Sam, I'm Sam. I just get like bothered by noise in cubicles. I have to like really block out sound in order to concentrate. Alex is, has all these loud conversations near my cube, and it is stressful. It's hard for me to focus. I'm always giving like these cues to Alex that I would like her to be a bit more quiet, but it's like she just doesn't pick up on them. I'll sort of look over, give her a little bit of a stink eye, try to tell her I'd really like her to keep her conversation low. I'll plug my ears at my desk so that she, can see that I'm trying to focus, but she just doesn't take the hint.
I haven't been taking the hint. I love people and conversation, and that's what makes my job most important to me. So I watched this young lady sitting at this desk, and she seems to just kind of be not part of the group. And I thought, I don't want her to feel left out. I really want her to be part of that, to join in, to enjoy the atmosphere of the working together with all these folks. So, yeah, we're not seeing eye to eye, I guess.
Right. So how would we imagine that this would go on if we don't have a conversation, right? I think it's likely that, I already forgot my character's name. I think it's likely that Sam will stay pretty irritated because Alex is going to continue trying to include me. So if I don't find a way to speak up, I'll probably just keep getting irritated. I'll probably complain at home about it. There are a lot of ways that this might happen. Mm-hmm. So what are Sam's needs in this situation? I have sort of...
What are your needs, Sam?
Yeah, so if we had this conversation... Yeah, I'm just really wanting to be able to focus when I do my work, and I have a tough time blocking out sound, and so I'm really just wanting some quiet during some of the time during the day so that I could focus.
Yeah, so when you're sitting there, it's really because you really like to get your work done, you need to focus on that, and it isn't really about not wanting to be part of the group.
Yeah.
It's that you have this other thing that's more important to you at the time.
Right, and for you, it seemed like it's really important for you to have some fun at work and to have this atmosphere of everyone being included, and yeah, I can see that about you, and can see that would be important, and even appreciate a little bit that that's sort of what you're hoping will happen. I wonder if there's some way that I could be included in what you're doing and also have some of the quiet, like maybe once a day in the morning or something, or in the afternoon, we could have like check-in time so that you and I could talk, and I can talk with the group and be included and also get my work done. Yeah. What would you think?
Yeah, so you'd be able to focus when you need to and get the job done. And I'd be able to say, that's okay, because we're going to talk later.
Right.
And it's not about you feeling left out and just sitting there by yourself. It's really that you need to do this for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could
work
there.
For me.
Yeah,
all right.
I could do that.
So that was obviously a super speeded up version of what could happen in a collaborative conversation, right? But we quickly went through sort of exploring what's important to Sam, what's important to Alex, and is there a way that is there a strategy they can come up with that will work?
And I just want to quickly say that I think a big part of this is that misinterpretation of behavior, because we haven't had conversations.
Right.
So we go to the thing that we know best. This is that thing about perspective again. We see it from our perspective and only our perspective until we listen to the other.
Right, and it makes sense. We only have what we have, in our brains to try to work with, so we need others to check in with us and let us know what's going on for them.
Yeah.
So just a quick review, and then we'll take some questions if folks are interested. So a review of what we've gone over. So collaboration entails working towards a common goal or purpose. It's really important to pay attention to power structures when determining a shared purpose. So whose shared purpose are you working towards? And our ability to collaborate with people we serve is directly related to our ability to see them as fully autonomous. So it will be really tricky to collaborate with someone that you don't think they have anything worthwhile to add to the conversation, right?
Or that they have the right to be autonomous.
Right, or that they don't have power over their lives.
Yeah.
So that was a flyby of collaboration. We're really wondering and really hoping that you have some questions. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Meeker for a minute and see if any have come up.
Not yet, so please submit your questions if you have any. One thing that I'm wondering about, you know, in the current healthcare environment where there's a lot of focus on outcomes and getting to outcomes, how does that kind of impact collaboration from your perspective?
You know, I have a lot of thoughts about this, Dr. Meeker. So we have been measuring people by something that they are supposed to make somebody else do. Collaboration definitely is telling us that each person is autonomous. Each person has to find importance in whatever the change is for themselves. And when that's the case, and we know that to be the case around behavior change, then measuring the outcome to judge how the staff person is doing is really not helpful in getting any change to happen. Because what happens when we're being measured by something over which we have no control? What happens to us? And putting that out, you know, rhetorically, but our fear goes up. Our sense that we're being judged about our work, and I got to make this person do this. It does interfere with our ability to have that conversation that accepts the autonomy and also really believes that the person has something of value as well. That other thing about just their unconditional positive regard thing, that you are a human being who is worthwhile just because of where you are right now. You know, that is a huge problem. When I first meet somebody that's struggling a lot, if they feel like I just can't wait to get in there and make everything different, how could they ever believe that I had unconditional positive regard and saw them as worthwhile? So how you approach that really matters. I want the person to know first that I value that they are an expert about themselves, I value what they believe will work for them, and that we will work together. I'm there to support it, I'll gently guide it, but ultimately it will be their decision, and they will be the ones to make the final decision. So I hope that answered what you were,
Yeah, thank you.
I can measure you as a staff person. I'm going to go on now, I'm on my place, by the willingness you have to continue growing as a professional and the skills that you're building and your desire to give the very best to the people you serve that you can. And that's very fair to measure. Measuring you by something else that you don't have control over, not so fair.
Yeah. So, sorry, we have to go over the CE information before people know.
I need to be quiet.
So, so for those who are seeking CEUs, this is kind of takes you through how to obtain those. So you can go to the website there and click on that link and then kind of follow the instructions in order to get your CEs for this session. And this is a continuation of information on how to get that, those contact hours. And if you have any questions, there's a phone number where you can get some assistance, or you can also email at silver.continuingeducation@nyu.edu. Here's our contact information. I know we didn't get to everyone's questions, so if anyone wants to reach out to us, we're available as a resource to you, so please feel free to reach out to us. And we'll have some additional sessions coming up. In August, we'll be focused on trauma-informed supervision, and then followed up by a webinar in September on resilience, and October also continuing the conversation on resilience. Here's some information on some additional upcoming webinars through CTAC, so please register for those. These both look very good.
That's it.
And that's it. So thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.